Okay, so I'll start just by introducing myself. My name's Mary Willis. I am a senior lecturer in the School of Health and Social Care. I'm also a registered nurse. And also senior tutor, so I look after the personal tutoring elements of this school. But today, I suppose I'm talking to you in my capacity as the module lead for fundamental nursing care, which is the first module actually that our students study when they join us in the first year, right when they're all bushy-eyed, no, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Okay, so I thought I was trying to think how to structure today to make it seem logical to try and explain what we've done on our module. And I thought probably the best way to do that was to first off think about why we started using Talis Elevate, then to look at how we use it and also Sage Catalyst now as well. And then to have a think about the impact that that's had for our students, for the rest of the module team, and for me as module lead. Okay, so I was invited to attend a training session for Talis Elevate through our academic librarian. The session was hosted. So I'm going to be honest, it was a bit of a kind of turn up and not really expect what to find. But I consider myself very lucky because I have gone on to use this throughout my modules. I find it really, really useful. So reasons why we started to use it. Our programme of nurses is almost 300 students in total per cohort. That obviously poses some real difficulties in terms of actually teaching that many students, and the amount of hours that we are required to deliver to our students to ensure that they're getting everything that they need from the programme. And also we have the joint kind of issue of our students also need to fulfill a certain amount of theory hours in order to register as a nurse at the end of the programme. So it's really important that we can evidence those hours, but as I say, that's difficult when you've got so many students. So what this results in is a high number of directed learning hours. So actually the students have more directed learning hours than they do face-to-face hours at the moment. So they're, obviously given resources, information set, work to do away from the classroom as adult learners. But we know that our students, anecdotally and from our module evaluations, we know that they struggle sometimes with that process. They feel a disconnect from the classroom. They're not quite sure how to engage in that learning. So they feel disconnected from us, but they also sometimes that can lead to a disconnect between them as well. When they're not in class, how can we maintain that connection between them to ensure that they're having those conversations and listening to other people's viewpoints? So that has always been an issue for us in terms of the directed learning. It can sometimes feel a little bit like you're kind of just sending them off and hoping for the best. The other issue, what we wanted to try and counteract is how do we know that they are engaging with those learning resources? To a certain extent, I suppose, we would hope that in order to pass the assignment, that actually that would mean that they would have had to have engaged in the learning. And also then that when they go into placement, that the same thing would be true. As it stands, I don't think that always works that way because students can be quite resourceful at passing assessments without necessarily engaging with all of the things that we want them to engage in. They also sometimes don't appreciate the value of what we're asking them to do because they can't view it in context in terms of their nursing journey, towards registration. So there were a number of reasons why we started to use it. And what we found was that it provided opportunities as well. So it gave the students an opportunity to communicate with one another away from the classroom using one kind of shared resource. in a way that I think it's very easy to use for the students. Once they've clicked on the link, that really is, the beginning point. It's not a difficult resource to do, and it means that they can have, they can comment on one another's comments. They can make comments about the work that you're asking them to look at. So it's a way for them to communicate with one another about the resources. Okay, it gives us the opportunity to communicate with them about those resources. So we can have, we can comment on their work, on their comments, on their opinions that they've put in, on any answers they've given in the comments section. So as staff, it provides a communication away from the classroom again. It also allows us to engage, to check their engagement. Okay, we can see how long students have spent on the resource. We can see how many students have been on the resource. We can see how many comments there are, how many hours have been spent on there. So that's a really good opportunity for us, not just in terms of policing them, because I think that's often what students think we're doing, kind of watching over them like Big Brother, but actually just making sure, are they doing the things that we're asking them to do, but are they finding them useful as well? So so in terms of why we started, those were opportunities that Talis Elevate presented to us. So when I first started to use Talis Elevate, I will admit that I was probably quite limited in how I approached using that. So a lot of what I was doing was simply taking resources that we already use, that we were already using, and that we were perhaps just uploading onto our VLE or, linking to so that students could find them. So academic articles that we've asked students to look at in the past, we now put those through Talis Elevate. Again, what this means is that the students engage with those and we can ask them to comment or answer questions. We use YouTube videos, which is really useful, particularly when we've been looking at bioscience this year. And also, around kind of clinical techniques as well. So we can use YouTube videos. And we have, in fact, as well, for the first time this year, myself and one of my colleagues had created a video for a particular patient interaction that we wanted the students to look at, and that is on YouTube. So actually we've now shared that, we've used that in that way, and although we've had that video for years, it's quite an old resource. I did it about 3 or 4 years ago. It's now got this new life where we can actually ask the students to comment on it and to pick out in real time on the video the exact points that we're trying to make, as opposed to getting them to watch it in a classroom and then kind of saying, oh, well, what did you think? It's much more immediate, the impact that it can have. And then as I have become more confident with the system, this year I've started to use the textbooks that are available through Sage Catalyst, and that's been really useful. Again, in terms of checking engagement, but also instead of asking students to kind of go and look at a chapter in a book and hoping that they do, we're able to identify the chapters that we want them to look at. And then just that chapter appears from the book and they can use that in the same way as they would use the other resources. And it's so easy to upload the resources. It just is so easy to get them on there. And then once they're on there permanently. So, I don't then have to think, oh God, where did I store that file? Or where did I put that? Have I saved it in the right format? It's been really nice this year to be able to come back and actually reuse resources from last year without having to hunt them down first. So when I'm using, for example, an academic article, the ways in which I would use that is that I would either kind of ask students questions, or I will perhaps put my own comments in to the resource to demonstrate, to try and get that conversation started. It's quite useful to kind of to sometimes put something in that you know is wrong, or that you know is going to prompt discussion because perhaps it's a contentious opinion. That works quite well at hooking the students in, because they're keen then to kind of argue with you and, you know, perhaps present the other side of the case. So, but the nice thing about it is that it's in a very safe environment. Obviously, we have that power imbalance with, you know, sometimes with academics and with our students, whereby they might not feel confident actually to challenge our opinion on something. But using Talis Elevate means that it's a safe environment. They're able to express themselves clearly, which they might again not feel confident doing in person, or just ask questions about the things that you've put up actually. Another thing that I quite often do, you know, with our first years being so new to this level of study, is to ask comprehension questions. So if I've put on an article which I know might have some challenging ideas in it in terms of the way it's written, the complex language, and the way it's structured, I might ask students to select a sentence that you know, initially confused them perhaps, or that they weren't sure what it meant, and to rephrase that in their own words. And that works quite nicely to check that they're actually kind of understanding what it is that we are reading about. And again, other questions, so kind of posing what if questions. So asking students, you know, as a student, how might you address an issue related to the article? We had a really interesting one recently where it was about antibiotic resistance. So I was asking students to put examples of occasions where they'd either witnessed or kind of had heard about poor practice in terms of the use of antibiotics that could potentially promote antibiotic resistance. And that was a really interesting talking point. There were some really good stories in there. Obviously, maintain confidence, you know, please don't name your great aunt Hilda for her poor antibiotic use. So we ask students sometimes to respond to one another's comments, or I would respond to student comments, to either kind of say, oh, that's a really good point, you know, or can you explain what you mean by that, that kind of thing, trying to get them actually engaged in a conversation. I do tend to find that you have to be really specific about the fact that you want them to comment on other students' comments. So I will often include that as part of the task. So, you know, I might set them a couple of things that I want them to comment on. And then the last thing might be, please, can you comment on, you know, another student's already existing comment. So that's, yeah, quite a good way of getting them to engage with one another. So in terms of the impact that this has had on students and the module team, and me in particular as the module lead, I'm a bit of a control freak, and I really like everything to be delivered in the same way, or in the way that I want it doing, if I'm honest. So I really like the fact that using this system means that the students become used to how they're accessing these resources. It's, you know, every week they know this is how I'm going to be able to go in it. It has consistency, and I really value that as a module lead and part of the team. But I think that students as well, I think there are so many different systems, aren't there, that, you know, when they come to university, that I think it's nice to have that consistency across the module. And in fact, I do also use it in some of the content for other modules as well. But as I don't lead those modules, that's more of a kind of personal preference, kind of stealth integration, I suppose, into other people's modules. I think for the students, what's really nice is to see their confidence grow. It enables them to feel like they have somewhere where they can use their voice and they can ask questions or put across opinions, perhaps that they wouldn't feel confident doing, either face to face or perhaps in a video call or something like that. So it allows them the opportunity to phrase what they want and take the time, because often when we write things down, it gives us the opportunity to say exactly what we mean. So I think it improves their confidence, and especially then if other students are echoing what they're saying and they're seeing, so they're reading an article and they're seeing that other people are saying the same thing, and that will help them to feel, actually, I think I might understand what's going on here. So that's a really key point. The fact that students can comment anonymously works really well for those students who are perhaps less confident, and that could be for a number of reasons. It might just be that they feel they don't have a great deal of healthcare experience, so they might feel that other people always know more than them, so they might be a bit reticent to put their points forward. It might be that they are working in a language that isn't their first language, so actually doing so anonymously to begin with, commenting anonymously to begin with, and then realizing that there is no judgment and nobody's going to come on and go, oh, you've spelt that word wrong. And that also applies to our students who perhaps worry or that have extra learning needs that mean that they're less confident to submit, and potentially they're worried about ridicule, whereas doing it anonymously and then seeing that that's been positively received helps to build confidence. I think it improves comprehension for our students. Sometimes the way I explain something or the way something is written in an article might make perfect sense to me, but it might not for other people. So actually, if other students then are paraphrasing what's in an article or are explaining it in a different way, that can help students have that kind of eureka moment of, oh, I get it now. It gives students an opportunity to ask questions, again, in a safe environment. So they're able to pose questions in the comments, and then, either one of the module team, or preferably for me, one of the other students will then seek to answer those questions. I think sometimes our students don't realize how valuable a resource they have in one another, so I think that's really important. It exposes them to a diverse range of opinions. There are some fairly contentious issues within healthcare, and it is interesting for students to hear what other people think if it isn't the same as their opinion. And I think that's really useful. We know that our patients all come from different walks of life, and so to start to expose them to that diverse range of opinions whilst they're studying is a really, really key point. It's also broadened the range of resources that we use. So it's allowed us to be more adventurous in terms of what we share with students, particularly this year, as I said, with having brought on board the Sage Catalyst publications. That's been really useful for students. So yeah, in terms of how it has helped us on the module lead and myself on the module team and myself as the module lead, I think, I could go on and on about the fact that it means that everything's presented consistently, but I think that really matters. It's really confusing if students don't know where they're going for things. I think I mentioned at the beginning that having that single point of storage as well for me has been brilliant. So actually I know now, obviously there are some things I'm going to update, but I don't now have that thing of thinking, oh God, I know I had a really good video about that. If only I knew where I'd put it. I know where they all now, they're all on Talis Elevate, which is brilliant. It's really easy to access. I have it saved as a favorite on my search bar on my browser. So, just click on that and I'm in. It's really easy to access, really useful when you're kind of in a hurry trying to get to things. The fact that you can provide feedback to the team and how responsive they are is brilliant. I really appreciate the fact that the team want to talk to me about what would be useful and what students might benefit from, what things am I looking for that would be really helpful. And certainly, in sort of, I think probably a couple of times a year, I have a meeting with someone who just wants to hear how we're getting on with it. Have we got any questions? Have we got any suggestions? And I've always found that to be really useful. Really enjoy interacting with the students as well. So it's really nice to hear some of the things that they comment, or to read the things that they comment. We don't always know, do we, what's going on in the heads of our students, and sometimes I think we do them a disservice because they're not perhaps being as vocal in face-to-face sessions, and we maybe assume that means they're not as engaged as those more vocal students. But some of the comments on some of the resources have just been really, really insightful, and yeah, that's a really heartwarming moment. As a bit of a soppy person, I like to know that we're actually getting through to them. And then, kind of using my policing hat, we can track engagement, and that's brilliant. Not only does it tell me if there are, it actually will tell me if there are certain students who haven't logged in for a certain amount for a while, or who've never, I'm able to check some students who've never been into the system. I can see those students that are engaging. That is not just about me policing my students, it's also about me recognizing that perhaps a resource that I thought was really useful, they've gone on to and thought, no, I don't like this for whatever reason. And that allows me the opportunity then to think, right, well, do I need to think again? Do I need to have a look for something else that perhaps would be more engaging or more appropriate for the students? So that, yeah, so many kind of positive impacts since we've started using these systems. As I sort of intimated at the beginning, when I first started talking, I am not a technical whiz. I am very much someone who will have a go. So it's got a really user-friendly interface, which is brilliant. It's intuitive, which is fab. And to put it simply, I haven't managed to break it yet. So that's a really positive thing. It's difficult to go wrong on, okay? Which is, useful for someone like me who does not naturally kind of drift towards technology. It's been really useful in terms of discovering new resources, particularly the Sage Catalyst textbooks. That's been really useful, and it hasn't just covered kind of the immediate content of the modules, such as the bioscience and the fundamental nursing skills. I've also been using some of the study skills resources there to support the students with their assessment. And the technical support, as I said in the previous slide, is really good. The team are really proactive and supportive, which is fab.